Well, now that my computer is fixed, I can actually get back to making videos again, and believe me, I have missed being able to work on content. I know that on y'all's end, it looks like I had videos going out all week last week, except for Friday, but on my end, those videos were done 2 weeks ago, so I basically just kind of sat here twiddling my thumbs. But now, I get to actually make some content again. And I want to talk about a commander that came out in the newest set, Bloomborough. Actually, I got a few videos on Bloomborough commanders, but this one is Balin the Haymaker. And Naya tokens is a very, very fun archetype to begin with, but we are going to try very hard to just swarm the board so much that it becomes almost unbreakable. Let's go ahead and get into things. Balin the Haymaker is a 4/3 commander who costs Naya to come out. Red, green, and white. You can tap 2 untapped tokens you control to add a mana of any color with Balin. You can also tap 3 untapped tokens you control to draw a card, or you can tap 4 untapped tokens to put 3 1/1 counters on Balin and give it trample until end of turn. And that one is basically a win con that we're going to be shooting for in this deck. So what is our primary goal in this deck? Pretty simple. Our primary goal is to get a bunch of tokens on the field and then use them to their umpteenth advantage. Balin is basically Kumeno, the big merfolk commander that has multiple tap abilities. He's that, but for tokens. So we want to spawn tokens that get on the board, and it doesn't matter what tokens they are, and we want to make sure that the tokens that are creatures can get in and attack when our commander can't win, but we're going to be winning with Voltron damage when our commander is on the board. We've got a whole lot of angles we have to be able to approach with this deck at the same time. We also need to make sure that our removal and other packages are all in service to what Balin is doing. So let's take a look at Balin's first ability and see how we can abuse that. If you notice, since it says tap 2 untapped tokens we control and add a mana of any color, we can actually do something really interesting with this. We can feed mana that we have, we can feed tokens we've created throughout the game into the creation of more tokens later on in the game. So the first thing we're going to be doing is making sure that we have a lot of X cost spells where all of our tokens we've created on previous turns will create compounding interest and give us more tokens later on in the game. Beginning with Finale of Glory. Create X/2/2 white soldier creature tokens. If X is 10 or more, make 4/4 angel tokens with flying and vigilance instead. This can just win us a game outright if this is the second or third token spawning card that we cast. Remember, half of what we spend into all of these X costs is going to become more mana for further X cost spells. We also have March of the Multitudes, giving us 1/1 soldier creature tokens with lifelink. It also has lifelink, not lifelink, it also has Convoke, which means unlike with Balin, where we have to filter 2 tokens into a single bit of mana, with March of the Multitudes, we can filter each token 1 for 1 into the mana for March, giving us a huge number of tokens. Wildfire Awakener is a win con in its own right. It's got Convoke as well. When it touches the battlefield, create X/1/1 red elementals that say whenever they become tapped, deal 1 damage to target player. Now note, this says when they are tapped, not when they die, not when they attack, but when they tap. So Balin's ability to just tap tokens to give us draw power and counters and mana will all feed into the Wildfire Awakener being able to just blow up somebody's life total. Then we have the Horn of Valhalla, which gives us X/1/1 creature tokens and also can give a creature 1/1 for every creature we control if we play it on its equipment side after we've played the Isgard's Call side. Now, with this card, again, this is just a win con. We play it 1 turn, we make a few tokens, and then we equip it to Balin, and then we tap those tokens to give Balin trample and +3/+3, +6/+6, +9/+9, depending on how many tokens are on the board. This means that Balin will have 1/1 for every token on the board, plus however many counters we fed into Balin, plus trample. That's probably going to be enough to just kill a player outright. Then we have Defenders of Humanity. When it enters the battlefield, create X/2/2 white Astartes creature tokens with vigilance, and we can exile this later in the game to create that many tokens again, only if we have no creatures and only during our turn. This is a insurance policy after a board wipe has hit us. Then we have Vrestin Menopta Leader. Flying, X cost as well. When it enters the battlefield, it gets X/1/1 counters on it, and whenever it enters the battlefield, make X green and white alien insect creatures. This can be an alternate win con to our commander as well. Whenever we attack with one or more insects, we put a 1/1 counter on all of them, making Vreston bigger, and of course making all the insects bigger as well. March of the Canonized makes us white vampire tokens with lifelink, and at the beginning of our upkeep, if we happen to have devotion to white and black 7 or greater, then we create a 4/3 white and black vampire demon token with flying as well. So this makes us a bunch of tokens, and then afterwards it slowly starts to build up more and more tokens for us. Then we have Audience with Tristani, giving us 0/1 green plant tokens, and then we draw cards equal to the number of differently named creature tokens that we have. This makes a single token that gives us a lot of draw. Then we have Decree of Justice, create X 4/4 white angel creature tokens with flying, or we can cycle it in order to get that many 1/1 soldier creature tokens and get a draw out of it instead. Just depends on what you want to pay into it. Increasing Devotion makes 5 1/1 humans, and if we flashback it, it'll make 10 1/1 humans. Form a Posse will make X 1/1 red mercenaries, which can also tap themselves to give Balin 1/0 until end of turn, which can be useful in some scenarios. If, say, an opponent has a Vorinclex out and we can't put counters on Balin immediately, this will give us an alternate way to make Balin big enough. Then we have Path of the Ghost Hunter, create X 1/1 white spirit creature tokens with flying, so they already have evasion. And then it's got a Will of the Planeswalker ability that in most games we are just going to be ignoring. And that's a lot of our token creation, but not quite all of it. You see, we still need to make tokens that last on the board for a long time. Making them in quick spurts isn't enough. So we've got 8 generating token spawners to look at too. If you look here, we've got Kadira, Collar of the Small. She's got Trample, and if she deals combat damage to a player for each token we control, we make a 1/1 white rabbit creature token. She's basically a late game doubling season for our tokens. Assemble the Legion will create a 1/1 token at the beginning of our upkeep, and every single turn, it will make another token on top of that. Typically, I don't like Assemble the Legion in most decks, but in our deck specifically, it is generating us enough tokens that Balin is going to see plenty of things on top of it, especially if we have Peregrine Took paired with it. Anytime we make a token, we also make a food. We can sack 3 foods to draw a card. Remember, Balin doesn't care about what kind of tokens we have on the board, just that they are tokens. So Peregrine Took will give us plenty of draw and mana and counters on Balin. Then we have Arasta of the Endless Web, which says whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, we make a 1/2 green spider token. Then we have Fabine, Boss's Confidant. This gives all of our creature tokens haste. And at the beginning of combat on our turn, for each player, we reveal the top card of their library. For every land revealed, we make a 1/1 green and white citizen creature token. Then, all of our creatures will get 1/1 until end of turn for each non-land card that was revealed this way instead, and then every player draws a card. A little bit of group hug, but a lot of power. We don't care if we get the 1/1s or the tokens. Either way, we are getting ahead of our opponents. Girid, Mirror of the Wilds, is also wonderful. Gives all of our non-token creatures the ability to populate, creating token copies of tokens we already have if they have entered the battlefield this turn. Battle for Bredegard will make a 1/1 human, then a 1/1 elf, and then on the final bit, it will let us choose any number of artifact tokens and or creature tokens we have with different names and make a token copy of every one of them. Because our deck has so many different kinds of tokens, this can sometimes generate us 7, 8, 9, or 10 tokens for the low cost of 3 mana. Then we have Queen Elenil of Ruidoc. This says its power and toughness is equal to the number of creatures we have, and if 1 or more tokens would be created under our control, we also make an extra 1/1 white soldier creature token on top of that. This is basically another copy of Peregrine Took, but it is a creature, so we can do some fun things with those tokens. Though, the benefit of Took over her is that food tokens don't tend to get targeted very well. But with all the creature tokens we're making, we do need a way to win the game with them. And obviously, turning them sideways is one way of doing it, and I'll show how to do that here in a second. But we also have 3 ways of turning those tokens into just straight up damage. First of all, Witty Roastmaster. Anytime another creature touches the board, deal 1 damage to each opponent. Molten Gatekeeper does the same thing, but it also has Unearth, so we can cast it later in the game if we lose it. And Warstorm Surge does the same thing, but it costs more mana because it does the damage to any single target. creature, player, what have you, and it's equal to the creature's power as we have them touch the board. So if we have Lords or Anthems on the board and we drop a bunch of tokens on the board, we might be looking at 20 or 30 damage to throw around, literally as we see fit, allowing us to keep very good control over the entire board. But we need to make sure that's not the only way we're winning. Sometimes burn isn't an option, and we just need to go to straight damage and fisticuffs. For that, we have Champion of Landhold. Anytime one of our creatures with power less than champion touches the board, we put a 1/1 counter on the champion, and creatures with power less than the champion cannot block if we are swinging. So the champion is going to sit here and always give us an easy way to push our tokens into our opponent's faces. Then we have the Pollen Shield Hair. Target creature gets Vigilance and XX until end of turn, which X is the number of creatures we control. Another way to make Balin lethal on somebody for 1 mana. And then later we can cast it as a creature to give all of our creature tokens 1/1. We also have another way of giving our creature tokens lots of power with King Darien. Darien gives all of our creatures 1/1, and we can pay 5 mana to put a 1/1 counter on the king and create a 1/1 white soldier token as well. We can do that at any point. This is a wonderful mana sink late into the game if our opponents do not board wipe us. If we're just sitting there with our tokens that are not hasted, but certainly need to be able to do stuff, we can just tap them all with Balin's ability, give King Darien the mana that he wants, spawn a few extra tokens, and of course give him a little bit of extra survivability against certain cards when we do that. We can also sacrifice him to give all of our tokens hexproof and indestructible until end of turn, which is a way to protect our board state, alongside for the common good, which makes X tokens that are copies of any token we have, and then all tokens we control get indestructible until end of turn, and we gain 1 life for every single token we control. Both of these, along with the other cards in our deck, will make it very hard to deal with us. We will constantly, after we have about 4 or 5 mana, we will constantly be able to put strong threats on the board and keep them on the board for a long time, because we will always be able to spawn more and more and more of them. And if we are in a pinch and we're about to get board wiped, at instant speed we can funnel all of those tokens, you know, just into draw power with Balin to put ourselves back ahead. If we're at 1 card in hand and 10 tokens on board and somebody casts Blasphemous Act, fine, we tap all of our tokens, draw 3 cards, and then go, that's neat, now I've got another card for my turn, I've got a 5-card hand, and I should be able to clap back now. Even if I'm not assembling a full token board, I should be able to get enough ready to go, even though I've lost my board. So always make sure to keep some tokens open just in case, so that you can do that draw for the clapback. That said, speaking of draw, let's talk about other ways we're going to be drawing some cards. Honestly, this section should be really straightforward. We want to have cards that either give us tokens or benefit our draw from our tokens. So let's begin with the super simple Mentor of the Meek. Anytime a creature with power 2 or less touches the battlefield, we may pay 1 and draw a card. Now, do bear in mind, this has some wonderful synergy with our commander. See, if we spawn, say, 6 tokens, that's 6 instances of Mentor of the Meek we may be able to draw from. But let's say we don't have any mana left. That's fine. We can spend those tokens to get half of our Mentor of the Meek triggers by tapping 2 tokens per trigger, and we'll be able to draw 3 cards anyway. It doesn't matter, really. Mentor of the Meek may be a card that typically forces us to sink lots of mana into his ability, but with our commander, the mana comes from the tokens we are spawning. And some of our cards spawn tokens when we draw, like Glimpse the Impossible. It gives us Impulse Draw for 3, and if we play those cards this turn, cool, we played them. But if we don't play any of those cards, we make an 0/1 Eldrazi spawn token in their place. That can also be sacked for mana, but that's likely never going to be necessary. Note, that means Glimpse the Impossible, even in its worst case scenario where we can't play any of the cards, still makes 3 tokens that can be tapped to draw us a real card we can have forever. Nalia Sun's Vanguard gives all of our tokens double strike, and if 1 or more of our tokens attacks a player, we then exile the top card of our library. During the turn we attacked with that token, we may play that card, so a lot of impulse draw attached to that as well. Eileen Harbreeze Busybody also lets us look at the top X cards of our library, where X is the number of tokens we made this turn, and we could put 1 of those cards into our hand and the rest on the bottom of our library in any random order. This gives us lots of card selection. We may not be getting a critical mass of cards in our hand, but we will be getting lots of selection for cards for our hand. Camaraderie and Shamanic Revelation are doing the same thing, giving us some life gain and draw for every card we control, or every token creature we control. Idol of Oblivion draws us a card every turn we've made a token. Phineas Ace Archer lets us attack and put a 1/1 counter on every other creature we control that is either a rabbit or a token. Then, if the creatures we control have power 10 or greater, we get to draw a card. This is giving us tons of power onto our board while also giving us easy access to draw. Rumor Gatherer lets us scry anytime a creature touches the board, and if it's the second time it's happened this turn, we get to draw a card instead. There's something to be said about the power of scrying through 10 cards on your board because you sunk 10 into an X cost, and being able to draw at least one of those cards. So Rumor Gatherer is doing a lot of work for us. Then we have Kutzel Malamut Exemplar. Our opponents can't cast spells on our turn while it's out, and if one or more creatures with power greater than its base power deals combat damage to a player, we draw a card. Given that we have a few ways to lord our tokens up or give them 1/1 counters, and given that our tokens will always be able to give 1/1 counters to Balin, this will generally give us lots and lots of card draw consistently throughout a game. And then we have Welcoming Vampire, which gives us a draw every time a creature with power 2 or less touches the board. This can only happen once per turn, but ideally we'll be using some of our utility cards later to spawn tokens on other players' turns to maximize effects like Welcoming Vampire. But we also need to make sure our opponents don't have access to good cards, so let's see how we're getting rid of them. Our removal package is very simple. We just want to make sure that we are clearing cards that are problematic because we will likely be the strongest presence on the board with our deck. So we just need to make sure our opponents don't get key pieces out. So let's start with Return to Nature, one of our 11 designated removal and reaction cards. This will blow up an artifact or an enchantment or exile a card from somebody's graveyard at instant speed. A very, very good way to stop a reanimation player from popping off. Rip Apart deals 3 damage to a creature or a planeswalker, or blows up an artifact or enchantment. That's 4 different kinds of permanents we can get rid of for 2 mana. Temporary Charm lets us choose 1, dealing damage to any creature or planeswalker equal to the number of creatures we have, or giving our creatures 1/1 and trample until end of turn for a quick win, or just making 2 green and white citizen creature tokens if we need that for reasons. This can be any number of things in any number of scenarios, from the game-winning thing or just getting rid of 1 problem card. You can take your pick, really. Decimate blows up an artifact, creature, enchantment, and land, so we get 4 cards for the price of 1 with this. Sundering Growth blows up an artifact or enchantment and then populates for us. Entrapment Maneuver makes a player sacrifice one of their attacking creatures, and then we make X 1/1 soldier creature tokens, where X was that creature's toughness. Collective Resistance lets us choose 1 or more depending on how much mana we pay into the Escalate, blowing up an artifact, an enchantment, or giving a creature hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Usually this is a really good way to keep our commander safe when we are otherwise experiencing some kind of board wipe scenario. Generous Gift blows up any kind of permanent by giving somebody a token. Dramoka's Command lets us prevent all damage any instant or sorcery would deal this turn, or blow up an artifact or blow up an enchantment, or put a 1/1 counter on a creature, or make a creature fight another creature that we don't control. A lot of times what this is going to do is it's going to be used to stop all damage that a Blasphemous Act would do to our board, or, you know, any kind of other big red board wipe, while also letting us get rid of a key creature. Delayed Blast Fireball is a scary card for us to go up against because we are a go wide little creatures deck, so Dramoka's Command gives us some good protection from that. Then we have Thraben Charm, lets us deal damage equal to twice the number of creatures we control to any creature, or blow up an enchantment, or exile any number of players' graveyards. Honestly, this card is cracked. Then we have Naya Charm, deal 3 damage to a creature, or blow up any card from a graveyard. Well, return it from a graveyard to a hand. So we can use this to stop a reanimation spell, or we can use this to recur one of our own important pieces, or we can tap all creatures a player controls, which can also allow us to just kill that player outright. If we don't have any way to get evasion otherwise, Naya Charm can just turn off all of their blockers instantly. But we have 3 board wipes as well we need to look at, and each of them benefits our token strategy in some way. Beginning with White Sun's Twilight, we gain X life and create X 1/1 Phyrexian Mites with Toxic 1, and if X is 5 or more, we blow up all the other creatures on the board. Oftentimes, this will just win us a game outright if nobody has a way to respond to the White Sun's Twilight. I'd recommend in several situations to just if you have enough tokens on the board but you can't break parity, just tap all of your tokens into the mana for White Sun's Twilight, and if you don't have a way to like protect your stuff in your hand, you don't need the extra mana, so you just blow up all the creatures on the board and then sit there with 20 or 30 of these Phyrexian Mites that will be able to kill everybody no matter what they do, because they won't have enough blockers. And if they do somehow get enough blockers to do something, then on our next turn, we just summon our commander again and use the mites like we would any other token to get back in the game, drawing us cards and giving us the mana to go forward. Then we have Martial Coup. This lets us create X/1/1 white soldier creature tokens. If X is 5 or more, blow up all other creatures. And then Hour of Reckoning blows up all the non-token creatures, and it's got Convoke, so we can just pay for it with our tokens. So honestly, this thing's fantastic. Get rid of all the non-token creatures, including our commander, and then cast our commander using the mana produced from our tokens. We could literally tap the tokens early while the commander's on the board, blow up everything, and then use that mana to get Balin back out, as if commander tax didn't really affect us at all. But, you know, that's a lot of mana to spend, so how are we going to get that mana? Now, while our commander makes a lot of mana on its own, sometimes we don't get to have our commander on the board, so we need some ways to play even when he's not out. So let's look at our 10-card ramp package, beginning with Font of Fertility. We play it on the board, sack it, and get a land from our deck onto the battlefield. Same with Dawn Treader Elk, and same with Wayfarer's Bauble. They're all basically the same card. Search for Tomorrow is a rampant growth that gets us the card untapped, but we can play it on turn 1 for its suspend cost. Rampant Growth, of course, is 2 mana and gives us any basic land from our deck onto the battlefield tapped. Charitable Levy lets us draw a card and get a plains out after 3 people have tried to cast non-creature spells while it stacks those spells. Honestly, I've seen some people not like this card in my comment section. Yeah, no, every single one of you is wrong. Like, really, really wrong. Like, demonstrably wrong. Charitable Levy is a fantastic ramp spell. Heaped Harvest is a new one from Bloomborough, though. Enters the battlefield and then gives us a basic land onto the battlefield tapped, and then we can pay 2 mana and sack it to gain 3 life and get another basic land out. 5 mana for 2 lands is not a good rate of return. You usually want to do 4 mana for that, but with Heaped Harvest, we can spread that mana across multiple turns, which actually benefits us quite nicely. Then we have Wood Elves, drops onto the battlefield and grabs a forest from our deck. Any forest, not just a basic forest, which will come in handy later. Then we have Arcane Signet, add any mana of any color in our commander's identity, and Tender Wild Guide, a mana dork that has offspring, so it will generate a token for us on top of just being a dork in its own right. Then for the mana we are going to be working with in the deck, we have 4 plains, 4 mountains, and 6 forests for our basic lands. Then for our dual lands, we are running 8 of them. We have Fortified Village, Furycom Snarl, and Game Trail as our come into play untapped as long as we reveal a land cards. Sometimes I'm not really big on these, but I think on budget decks I'm starting to warm up to them a little more since they have a higher basic count to begin with. Then we have Sungrass Prairie and Mossfire Valley as filter lands, as the Boros filter land still costs like 73 cents, which puts it outside of our deck's ability to afford. Then our Fetch a Bull dual lands are Sacred Peaks, Canopy Vista, and Cinder Glade. Each of these comes into play untapped except for the Sacred Peaks because we don't have a Boros Tango land. Wizards of the Coast, please finish the Tango land cycle. I would like to be able to play a Boros Tango land now. Then, for fetching lands, we have 9 of them, beginning with the usuals Evolving Wild, Terramorphic Expanse, and Escape Tunnel, which are all effectively the same card, grabbing us any basic land from our deck, and then we shuffle. Then we have Naya Panorama, Shire Terrace, and Promising Vein, which are all the same card. They come into play untapped and tap for mana like normal, or we can sacrifice them with 1 mana filtered into them to get any basic land out of our deck onto the battlefield. Then we have Sheltering Landscape, one of the best things to come out of Modern Horizons, and it is fantastic. It's a non-tapped land that gives us a basic mountain, forest, or plains card, or we can cycle it if we need to. Like, it's the best of Shire Terrace and Evolving Wilds combined. And then we have Crozen Verge and Myriad Landscape. Two of the same card, kind of, sort of. So the Landscape comes into the battlefield tapped and then lets us pay 2 and sacrifice it to grab any 2 basic land cards from our library and put them onto the battlefield tapped. They have to be the same kind, though. Crozen Verge is a bit stronger in that it can grab any forest or plains, well, forest and a plains, from our library and drop it on the board. Ideally, when you tap K-Verge, what you want to do is you want to grab Sacred Peaks and Canopy Vista. This will give you a forest in the Canopy Vista and a plains in the Sacred Peaks. You could also get the Cinderglade too, but since they come into battlefield untapped anyway, or tapped anyway, I'd rather the Crozen Verge grab the Sacred Peaks so that we don't end up drawing a tapped land when we honestly don't need it. Then we have 2 Omni lands, the usuals of Command Tower and Exotic Orchard, followed by 4 utility lands. Windbrisk Heights is interesting. It's a hideaway land, lets us get a card from the top of our deck and put it under it. And then we can cast that card if we attack with 3 or more creatures. Now, do note, we do not want to get any card with X in its mana cost, because then we will just lose the card. Use this to get utility cards or removal spells. Those are far more important with Windbrisk Heights. Kur Keep is a colorless land that allows us to make kobolds for 2 mana. Castle Ardenvale is a white land that lets us make humans for 4 mana. And Pit of Offerings gives us another way to get rid of graveyard shenanigans when we need it. Use this against the Marin of Clan Neltoth player so that they can't constantly use Fleshbag Marauder to hurt everybody but you. I mean, maybe don't do that because you're basically unaffected by Fleshbag Marauder, but a Cursed Marauder does hurt, so maybe get rid of that one from the graveyard instead. And that's about it for the actual deck itself, but what if you had a little more money and you wanted to spend more than the $16 I used to build this deck? Well, let's talk about that. As with all of my $15 deck builds, if you are upgrading it, just take out the things that do not speak to you flavor-wise and grab the things that do speak to you flavor-wise. Now that we're talking about upgrades, we are not restricted by budget anymore, and we've got about 19 of them to go through. Some of these are basic and really are kind of just understood to be used in these colors. Some of these are a little more esoteric, so let's go ahead and get into things. Let's begin with Beast Within and Stroke of Midnight. Both of these cards serve only one purpose for us. They blow up cards at a very, very good rate because they can blow up damn near anything. Pest Infestation blows up any number of artifacts or enchantments for the double X we pay into it, and then we make that many pests afterwards, so just fantastic for getting more tokens and clearing a board out. Rite of Harmony also is a great draw spell. It lets us get a draw every single time a enchantment or creature enters the battlefield this turn. So cast it and then cast one of your X spells to draw like 5 or 6 cards. This may actually not be super necessary with Balin in the deck, but this is going to be a flavor call for you. Speaking of calls, Call for the Copper Coats gives us a 1/1 human soldier for every creature an opponent controls, and we can pay the Strive cost to get this ability more than once. Bootlegger Stash lets us turn all of our unspent land mana into tokens, which can then be used for more mana later. Like, honestly, once you have Bootlegger Stash, you probably just stop tapping your lands for the mana for anything and just make tokens, because again, it creates compounding interest for you. Tap the tokens for mana for Balin instead of sacrificing them for their stuff. Then we have Beastmaster Ascension. This is just a straight-up win con. Anytime one of our creatures touches the board, put a quest counter on it. After 7 quest counters, all of our creatures get 5/5. Flare of Fortitude and Boros Charm are both good ways to protect our board. Caretaker's Talent gives us more draw when our tokens touch the board. Also gives us a really good anthem at the end. Orin Frostfang and Toski give us draw power when our tokens punch people in the throat. Akroma's Will is a wonderful way to close out a game, giving our tokens lifelink, indestructible, protection from everything, flying, vigilance, and double strike. Aura Shards is a way to clear out more artifacts and enchantments at a very good rate. War Leader's Call is another win con. It gives our creatures 1/1 and also gives us another witty Roastmaster effect. Growing Rites of Itlamok is possibly one of the most important upgrades you can put in the deck, literally ever, because this card just touches the board and immediately gives us a creature from the deck and then flips into a land that gives us 1 mana for every single creature on our board, which we will have many. We will have multitudes. If you cast Growing Rites of Itlamok and nobody gets rid of it and you flip it, you've probably won, because now a board of 30 tokens doesn't look like 30 tokens anymore. It's 30 tokens plus 30 extra mana, not counting the mana the tokens can filter into because of Balin. And then we have Clever Concealment and Teferi's Protection, more ways of protecting your big board state, and Perforos, God of the Forge, a faster way to make sure that all of our opponents burn to death as we spawn tons and tons of tokens. And that about wraps it up, though obviously if there's any upgrades you would want to do to the deck, maybe let me know in the comment section below. That said, let's go ahead and wrap things up. In conclusion, Balin the Haymaker is just an absolutely silly rabbit. This commander can get out of hand so nightmarishly quickly, and if you were to put in some more protection pieces for Balin to just keep it on the board longer, like Lightning Greaves or anything like that, then honestly the deck would become a straight up menace. I didn't add those to this version, or really any way to protect the commander outside of our instant cast ones this time around, because that's not the vibe I wanted to go for. I didn't want the unassailable fortress. I wanted a deck that you needed to respond to, and if you didn't, then you died. But obviously, this all comes down to a flavor preference for you. I also really like X-cost spells in general. I like decks that allow me to abuse X-cost spells, because as a kid, I would always try to figure out how could I put the most into an X-cost spell, make it the biggest, most Timmiest spell possible, though I wasn't aware of the whole Johnny, Timmy, Spike, and Vorthos game design thing from back then anyway. That said, let me know what you think in the comment section below about Balin. I think, as far as token decks go, he's probably one of the strongest token commanders we have ever gotten, like over and above, say, Jetmir. But again, I want to know y'all's thoughts. Let me know down there in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you haven't already, and as always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here. Hey, just wanted to give a quick thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who help keep me afloat and help keep this channel going. YouTube and Twitch are wonderful platforms, but at the end of the day, stability is not one of their strong suits. If you want to support my channel, then obviously Patreon is one of the best ways of doing that. Link is in the description. But I do want to personally thank everybody who has contributed to the channel. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Autumn and Angel, Nixie Chan, Mark Anthony, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that, Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fire Shard. And everyone else who supports my channel and lets me do what I do full time. This is a dream job of mine that I never believed that I would be able to take full time, and with your help, I've been able to do it. So thank you so very much for that. Thank you for watching the video. I hope you all enjoy, and I hope you all are having a wonderful time. I will see you all in the next one, hopefully.